All right. Welcome back, everyone. We are going to be looking at Chapter 10, Relics of Tree Worship in Modern Europe. Last time that we got together with Aastik, I was like, oh, yeah, we're totally going to be able to talk about the beneficent powers of tree spirits and Chapter 10. And little did I know we only got a third through of the slides that I had presented to the group. So today we're going to talk about the other 2/3 of those slides. Hopefully we can get through them. I was able to add a couple more that were inspired and generated from our conversation last time. So I'm looking forward to this. We may have Kelly pop in here. I'm not exactly sure if that's going to happen, but if she does, we welcome her with open arms. And we have our producer Jordan back as always. And I'm going to get in the habit of just saying this as a top of everything that we do together. Jordan's the reason why anything on this channel sounds and looks good at all. It really frees me up to do a lot more of the research and prepare to have these stimulating conversations with my friends. So, Jordan, thank you for everything that you do.
Yeah, you're welcome, and I look forward to the brutal roasting and maybe constructive feedback on the technical side in the comments.
Well,
Always getting better.
yeah, please be gentle. We're all learning as we go along here. So, yeah, I have a little bit of writing just to start us off, and then I'm sure the discussion will get pretty riotous as we go here. So in chapter 10, Relics of Tree Worship in Modern Europe explores the enduring legacy of tree spirit veneration in European customs, particularly through May tree and maypole traditions that reflect ancient animistic and polytheistic beliefs in the vegetation spirit's powers of fertility, prosperity, and renewal. This presentation will trace these practices across 4 thematic sections. First, the foundational May tree and maypole customs that brought tree spirit blessings to households, as seen in historical examples like Elizabethan England's festive poles. Second, diverse regional variations of May Day and midsummer rituals across England, France, Sweden, and beyond, showcasing local adaptations. Third, the renewal of May trees to sustain the spirit's vitality, including burning rituals. And fourth, anthropomorphic representations where tree spirits are embodied as human figures like Green George or Saint Bride, blending pagan and Christian elements. By examining these customs, we'll uncover how ancient tree worship persists in modern festivals, connecting to broader themes of life and nature. So I think everything we're going to talk about today naturally flows from what we talked about last time. I think if you want a strong background in what we're going to talk about, I highly recommend everybody going back to watch that. I'll have it uploaded tonight. But I'll open it up. And Aastik, did you want to share any of your impressions or initial thoughts about the section that we had prepared for today?
Not really. I'm hoping that you'd carry along and I'll interject whenever it's required. Not think.
Well, you're quite the chatterbox before we got going here today. I was like, please pump the brakes. I'm going to use up my voice. We
Uh,
won't be able to get through this.
I was thinking, I read about the film Midsummer regarding this because that's the most popular contemporary representation I could find about this Maypole festival, and it's like kind of cousin that's in Midsummer. So it was less about what we're going to discuss today. It was more about how cults operate and how in the film it was quite different. It was a horror movie, so they had to make it so that this whole cult, it actually made itself one with nature, so much so that it actually started imitating nature, like a plant. So if a plant grows, it spreads its pollens outwards, and then they bring out, like they go outside to fertilize, and then the entire plant acts like in a whole community. That's what the thesis of the film was like. There's a whole union into like, maybe people call it like, might call it like socialism or something like that, like they are all behaving in the same way, that sort of way. But it was like, culturally they were very naturalistic. They were believing in, like, they pick up traits from the birth of the children, so they assign jobs according to those traits. I mean, it was different. So I don't know if it is relevant to the discussion here. So
I think it is. I mean, you said this is the film Midsummer that you're talking about?
yeah, the 2019 Ari Aster movie. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fascinating, right? Like, if you start to engage in these types of festivities, like based upon nature worship, does the body politic start to resemble some sort of vegetative spirit in general, right? So that would be a fascinating thing to look into. That the more that one increases pagan belief, ritual, discipline, etc., is that reflected in a more broader body politic? That's a very interesting thesis that I think someone, if they haven't already, should explore. So I'm grateful for you for picking up on that.
Yeah, that's about it. I
Okay,
mean, yeah. One more thing. Since we are discussing maypole, so there was this discussion about like Stonehenge being the Stonehenge. That's in Britain, I think. Its significance is related to solar solstice. So that says that how far beyond this kind of sun worship, and like even in the film Midsummer, they worship this sun, this festival, because they are in daylight for 24 hours of the day. That's the longest day. So they are located in that place, so there's no night. Even in midnight you'll see sun. So it's kind of connected to how astronauts feel in space, that they have no sense of time. They're always surrounded by sun. They're always lighted up. So that's how the movie kind of tried to connect these two things, like loss of time, and then like isolation and everything. But then
that's
the
really
group finds itself. Yeah.
that's really fascinating that you point that out. One of the things that I did not see in the Fraser, but I suspect is connected to cosmological issues, like you were mentioning with the sun worship in midsummer and how astronauts may feel in space, is that I've often wondered if the maypole itself is like a model of the universe, at least as it's understood by more primitive people, right? It's like Fraser doesn't talk about this, but like are the individuals that are going around the maypole like celestial bodies, if they are like the stars that are rotating around the sky, and perhaps the sun would be at the center of that, or perhaps some other star like the North Star, which I think would probably be more accurate to say, right? This is the star that supposedly does not move, and so that the heavens are sort of rotating around this heavenly body. He doesn't really seem to connect that to astronomical and astrological issues. It's all about the veneration of the tree spirit. But for Fraser, him talking about the entire ensouled pagan world, everything is animistic. Everything has a spirit. It doesn't just be like last time we sort of contemplated, like, why did primitive peoples start to imbue souls into trees and the forests and things like that? Well, really, they did it with everything. So I wonder if it's even proper to think about, okay, here we're just talking about vegetation, and here we're talking about solar worship. It seems like they form an interconnected whole. So I found that to be interesting that he didn't take that opportunity, and maybe he does later, to talk about the solar or astronomical dimension of the maypole dance.
Yeah, that's a good point. You see that everywhere. I mean, even in films, I see that. Like, uh, like if people are dancing in a ballroom in a specific way, so I kind of think like they're like planets that are revolving around a particular center. That's what I connected with. What else did I connect it with? Collisions of people in Kubrick movies. I'm talking about Kubrick movies. People colliding with each other. So it's like they're kind of exchanging their fates, or like their fate is being changed if people collide. Like Jack collides with that lady in the ballroom after he gets his drink, and like Tom Cruise, like Bill Harford, when he's walking around and he's like pushed around by Yale students. So that's how his life changed after that. Like he had this. So that's what I think. Like these astronomical, these are like I don't know. I thought about this like very far out. I thought about like these are like planets, like gods from outside affecting this world, like creating this kind of accident and then sending them off to other directions. That's a far out
Well,
idea. You can cut it off,
well,
maybe.
that's not too far out from me or Jordan. I don't want to speak for her. She might want to weigh in on this, but I think your ponderings there are potentially relevant. I mean, Kubrick sinks like waltzes, right? In 2001, we see
Yeah.
Strauss's Blue Danube. in the I believe the second scene right after the bone jump cut. Now I've always talked about that in regards to nuclear weapons, because Blue Danube was the name of the UK's first atomic weapon, and we see these atomic platforms or satellites that are kind of going around in a waltz in outer space. But I mean, I'm sure, we can talk about other composers like Gustav Mahler, who had, the composition of the planets, who, probably saw, I'm not some sort of expert, but probably saw some sort of connection between dance rituals and the heavenly motions. I really don't think that is a far out thing to talk about. And as far as the planets being gods, this is biblically based. You can read you read the book of Jude. It clearly talks about stars and wandering stars as having a form of sentience and preternatural point of origination. Jordan may have something to say about this. I think astrologers in general sort of subscribe to a similar sort of idea. I know that Jordan and I are both fans of Carl Jung, and that this idea of like archetypes and energies and things like that being forms of gods are really not that strange when you get to the more out there stuff of Carl Jung. Do you want to weigh in on this, Jordan?
I mean, we've talked in other stuff. Like, my perspective is these planets are planes, and they are planes of consciousness. And that's probably as deep as I want to get into it right now.
I would say that's perspectival. They're perhaps gods from a human perspective, but not properly God as such.
Yeah, if you're talking about like prime creator, great creator, like source, God, that feels different. I think this language being used throughout Frazer and the Golden Bough, like this conception of gods, goddesses, yes, I would say planets might fit into that.
Well, and just for anyone else who's interested, Jordan and elsewhere has talked about her belief in the sun being conscious. And I highly recommend people looking into morphogenetic field theory of Rupert Sheldrake, if that's an idea that they want to go deeper into. I don't know if Jordan's familiar with that particular thinker, but I came across his work again. I've known about him for some time, but I came across some videos of his this week where he loudly and proudly makes that claim. And it really doesn't seem to be too different from our ancient ancestors or primitive forerunners and everything that they believed.
Yeah, I haven't read that, so I'll have to check that out. Thank you.
Yeah. Jordan probably got that from a download. She has just knowledge, whereas I have to go read it in a book.
You could get it both ways.
That's true. Well, all right. Well, we're talking a lot about solar stuff. Why don't we progress? See, Aastik was worried that we wouldn't have too much to say. I was like, I know we're going to have a lot. So let's go to the second slide. And these are just examples of different May tree and maypole traditions. I mean, it may be sort of boring for everyone just to index them, but some of them are particularly interesting. I mean, I'll just read one here. This is from Cornwall in the UK. On May 1st, doors and porches were adorned with sycamore and hawthorn boughs and tree stumps placed before houses, invoking the vegetation spirit's renewal and abundance. So there's one particular example, and we might be able to progress to the next slide. Let's see here. We'll go stay in England. We'll go to Northern England with the flower branches ritual here. After midnight on May 1st, youths gathered branches adorned with nosegays and flowers, hung over doors, windows at sunrise, signifying the tree spirit's gift of prosperity. And there are many more. One of the things I thought was interesting from this section is that Frazer brought in this, I believe it was a pastor named Stubbs, and he kind of talks about him in kind of a condescending way, where Stubbs, do you guys remember this passage where he's like talking about the maypole being a stinking idol, and that the true lord of this festivity is Satan himself, right? Which is interesting because, Frazer's going to talk about these anthropomorphic instantiations of the tree spirit. So it's interesting to think about whether or not Satan is somehow connected to trees and tree spirits. Of course, we see Satan tempting Eve to eat of the tree of of knowledge of good and evil. So early on in the Bible, we have Satan as many popular renditions of him are like a serpent that's in the tree tempting Eve. So I think one, and this might feed into something Aastik and I were talking about off air before we went on, that the Christian uh, uh, theme of trees. Aastik mentioned Jesus being a carpenter, and I think last time I mentioned something about Jesus dying on a tree or being crucified on a cross. But very early on, we have this serpent figure in the Garden of Eden. Perhaps I don't think it really says that in the Book of Genesis, but popular renditions shows that the serpent is sort of like wound up in the tree, tempting Eve. But what was interesting is to get that contemporary perspective on the maypole traditions and how he was saying this is fundamentally satanic, and the young maidens go the eve before the maypole is dragged out, go into the forest, and he says scarcely a third return undefiled, and it makes you, perhaps that's what that movie Midsummer is about. I've not seen it, but it kind of colors it a little bit differently than just a bunch of like young people dancing around a tree. Like there might be more sordid rites and rituals associated with it.
I mean, in the Swedish myth, there's a there's a figure called the Dark One, who is supposed to have, like, he's a fiddler. He's a dark fiddler, and he's supposed to like entice all the people in the village to dance around the maypole, and then they all dance like in a like a Dionysian kind of way, and the one who survives, who has the most stamina, who does not fall off, and the one who keeps dancing, that girl, or I mean, it's a girl, is like proclaimed the May Queen. So in Swedish, they have this kind of mythology that you're talking about, like at least in the folktale, not in practice. So in the
So
folktale, they kind of see that like the dark one is tempting, is playing the fiddle that they're
that's
dancing to.
that's that's really interesting, because in America we have Satan associated with a fiddle player. I don't know if Austik's in northern India. I don't know. Have you ever heard the song by the Charlie Daniels Band, "The Devil Went Down to Georgia," where Satan like plays the fiddle against a mortal, and they enter into a struggle over fiddle playing? I wonder if that's where that comes from.
I mean, not that this myth is quite recent in 17th century, I think, in Sweden, but like I think Satan is associated with fiddle playing long back, like they called Nero. He played the fiddle while Rome burned, something like that. So they wanted
Oh
to cool
yeah,
him.
that's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. And Nero is considered by some to be the
Yeah.
Antichrist.
Yeah. I mean, those kind of things. I mean, like Christians, like in the beginning, Christians were kind of like very vulnerable group. So they had these tales about what's going on, what's going to happen. Like there's events and they're canonized. That's what I feel. I mean,
Um, oh, I'm trying to remember the other thing I was going to say about it. Well, I know what I was going to say is that it may not always be fiddles, right? Like it's an interesting thing to contemplate, like how the Satan figure is like the amalgamation of a lot of different stories and folklore, etc. Like what's in the Bible, what's not, and how the figure of Satan like evolves through the Bible. Um, because we kind of get different aspects of who Satan is in the Book of Genesis, in the Book of Job, and in the New Testament. There's one could do a very interesting study on that, but I wonder about the figure of Pan. We talk about fiddles and fiddle playing and whoever's the last one, Pan and his panpipes. I believe Pan is like a faun, which is like considered to be a woodland creature of some sort. So I wonder too if there is some sort of syncretism here that is going on between the Christian understanding of the devil and these rites and rituals in pagan Europe and Greece. Yeah. Don't know. I don't know. I'm just floating this out there. I mean, I'm perhaps confusing things by being so speculative here, but I'm seeing the convergence.
I mean, there's in films at least, there's a notion of kind of evil being represented by chaos in a way. So like whenever something's like not controllable, even in Midsummer, these figures like the villagers, they're seen as like actual horror movie villains. So they are encouraging the main lead protagonist to dance. Her name is also Danny by uh, coincidence. So I think that would be a deliberate choice. But I mean, in general, like in the latest film, which was what it was called, Nosferatu, there's an association with chaos, with like these gypsies and Romani people. They're associated with like chaos and like ambiguities, and then the backward rituals, that sort of thing. So with Nosferatu, I felt like they are bringing the Christian perspective like very strong. Like they don't know these things. They like this fear of kind of unfamiliarity, and this thing coming onto them, and how would they interpret it? Like what is not codified under the laws. There are certain laws that people follow, kind of like that are drilled into us, or like we imbibe living in a society. But like sometimes like nature breaks through, and those laws are subverted, or like um, kind of not obeyed in particular. So this comes off to the other person, like onlookers, the people who are not experiencing this, as like this is person is taken over by a witch, or like a demon, or this is a demonic person. I mean, sometimes they are actually demonic, like bad. There's like there's appetites, like he in the film Nosferatu, he also says that I'm nothing but an appetite. It's like this an endless well of desires, like greed and everything, all sins boiled into one. So I found that that was a very compelling Christian narrative. Like they confront the unknown while also like trying to not kind of throw it away. Like they think that this is a part of us. We have to confront it, and we have to overcome it to be good, and to have this stable, like stable civilization that we want to have. Like that's what I felt. That's the general theme in all most movies, about like chaos and Satan being associated with chaos. So, and like cult worship and everything. That's what.
Yeah. I think those are interesting perspectives. I mean, something that I thought, responding to what you had to say there, the way that Fraser presents a lot of these different festivals is like, and these rites and these rituals is pretty matter of the fact. He's not trying to engage in anything sensational and saying things like, "Oh, that this is like satanic or demonic." In fact, we see by this pastor that he brings in, Stubbs, where he kind of mocks that perspective. But I think it's pretty obvious that it is functioning as like some sort of release valve, like you're talking about, like that these super imposition of legalism and rationality or whatever is ultimately going to give way to these ancient rites of fertility and fecundity. But then interestingly enough, like it's it's perhaps not right to like take out the religious dimension of this, because at least through syncretism or something, the religious figures are getting retroactively put into these rituals, because in many different cases we'll see um, figures like witches and death and things like that are ultimately burned in acts of renewal when we burn these trees or we burn these maypoles or whatnot. So I don't think it's. I think it seems like Fraser's kind of trying to have his cake and eat it too by not emphasizing something that we might want to call demonic in this stuff, because clearly the people who are participating in them feel, at least in the modern presentation of them, that there is something like that at work. And even if it is at work, they still seem to want to taste it or be involved with it, and perhaps they feel like there's some sort of cleansing or renewal thing going on with them. Perhaps this is where Nietzsche would be helpful in trying to understand this, but it seems to be a dimension that Fraser is not really covering in these subjects. That's my take. I mean, I could be wrong.
I mean, yeah. But, nothing to say. I mean, yeah, that's an opinion.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I
um,
mean, do you think? I mean, how do you feel about Fraser's tone?
I mean, I think he's trying to avoid it basically by not talking about religion. But I don't think like he's avoiding it because he thinks in reality it is demonic, but I'm not calling it. And like he's like he thinks that these are kind of rituals that are outside of Christianity. They have not experienced that kind of lifestyle. So he treats them as maybe they have developed themselves, like through to interacting with natural world. I was talking about that thing because it was like a cultural clash. With the previous thing I said, it was about a cultural clash of values and worldviews. But I think he does not want to kind of impose his own Christian views on the people there. He wants to stay away from it, and he mocks the person who does that, because it's sometimes, things can be evil. If you see them, evil things, they're objectively evil, like you don't have to like look too deep into them. Sometimes that could be termed as demonic, just
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, yeah. It makes me question if we're getting the full story about these rituals from Fraser, because he is trying to be so objective and not give in to that perhaps religious spirit that he finds to be distasteful. So I'm just curious. And obviously, when a film like Midsummer is made, and though I've not seen it, and it has all these, it's got like homicide and sacrifice and things like that in it. It makes me wonder: is that closer to the truth of how these festivals worked, or is that being used for another propaganda agenda, where we're trying to perhaps besmirch a particular culture and turn something that was joyous and innocent into something really depraved?
uh
I
when
don't
I
have a
think
lot of sources on this. My this I've never really thought seriously about this stuff before the Golden Bough, so I don't know.
uh I don't think it's propaganda. It's kind of, it's like the movie is trying to seduce you in a way. You can call it propaganda if you will. It's
I don't
it's trying
know.
to seduce you into a way of thinking, of way of being, that is, because the film shows characters that are in like perfectly like the situations that we live in currently, like normal lifestyle. We have a boyfriend, girlfriend, and like we have parents and everything. But then tragedy strikes the main character, and then her whole world kind of, you know it fractures away. And while she is vulnerable, she finds this group of people who have these like insane rituals, and they have these certainties of life, like for 1 to 18 years you will be this, for the next 18 years this is your role, for the next 18 years this is your role, and after the next 18 years you will die, like you'll, you know that's it kinds of offers a certainty, offers, the whole world will, the whole community would like feel me, because in the film she's feeling quite isolated. Her own boyfriend is not kind of responding. He does not want to respond. He's like, oh god, why is she calling me again and again? So like, yeah, that's the film. The film is trying to show how you can be seduced into this sort of cult. Like it is basically using this already pre-existing tangible thing, and like heightening it by like supplying it with different kind of rituals, like kind of exaggerating everything that's all about it. You
Yeah.
don't feel time, you don't, you fertility, so you're like doing this, like Fraser describes these rituals in the next chapter, like vegetation and sexes or something like that people are actually like doing it in the fields to promote fertility. So they do that in the film Midsummer as well. So I thought, oh wow, they're actually doing it. It was written in the book. So I found, oh, that's pretty interesting. So
All right.
he's
Well,
kind of picking up from all these sources and putting it in the film. That's what I liked about it. It's like an encyclopedia.
I'm not a horror movie person, but I think I'm gonna have to see this one. Why don't we, unless Jordan wants to add something here, I think we should progress to the next slide, if that's okay.
Yeah, that works for me.
Okay.
Yeah, and totally related to what you've been discussing.
Okay. So this image, I just thought this was a cool image. We're going to be talking about the regional variations on May Day and Midsummer Rituals, really just kind of more of the same things that we've been talking about. But I thought this was a cool painting. It's on St. John's Eve. This is the Feast of St. John by Jules Breton from 1875. I believe that Breton made this because he was prohibited from engaging the festivities by his father, and it kind of came out in this way. But I think it's interesting that for Saint John, John the Baptist is the one that gets associated with the syncretic um, fertility rituals in Europe, and that's he's the only saint. I found this kind of doing a little preparation today. Of all these different saint days, I don't, not being a Catholic, I don't know about saint days, so I'm like kind of teaching myself about this. And Saint John is the only saint to have his birthday celebrated, which I think is reckoned as June 24th, and every other saint is celebrated on their death day. So I thought that was interesting. There's probably a lot that could be pulled from that, but I'm so fascinated. There's another saint figure that we'll look at today. We'll look at Saint George. I had to do a little research into who Saint George was, but Saint Bridget or Saint Bride I have later in the presentation. Just how it comes about that the particular saints are picked for particular pagan festivals, like how this happened. I feel like that's like a super fascinating story to put together one day. Some of them I understand, some of them I don't. But yeah, this is St. John's birthday that these rituals are occurring on frequently. Perhaps that's old news to everybody. I thought that was fascinating.
No,
No,
yeah.
Jordan.
Yeah, I wanted to hop in and share. Let me see if it'll load. In Seattle, May Day is basically a protest day every year. And sometimes there is fire that occurs in the midst of these protests. I don't want to get too deeply into like the encoding and the media, etc. But looking at the slide that you shared today with the fires and May Day, it just feels like a little bit more than a coincidence that they would have this. The focus is stated that it's on labor rights, workers' rights, and immigrants' rights in the Seattle area. But while I was living there, we kind of knew, and working downtown, you'd get an email saying, hey, leave work early because all the buildings are going to be smashed in if you're working in one of those high rises downtown. So anyway, just thought it was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I always associated it with like communist ideology. I don't know. I guess it's International Workers' Day.
Yeah, it is a like bigger thing. I'm not sure. I mean, we could like spiral on the fractal, like the details within this particular fractal, but I just think it's interesting that at minimum this Maypole Festival, this May Day, at least has been co-opted, or I don't know if it's like a distortion from the original meaning of it or if it's an evolution of it. Like I kind of lean towards the first thing I said, but
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Was this chosen at random? Like, were there external factors, or like was this somehow woven into the fertility rights and all of that? Wikipedia says the date was chosen by the American Federation of Labor to commemorate a general strike in the United States, which had begun on May 1st, 1886, and culminated in the Haymarket Fair on May 4th. The 1st of May, or first Monday in May, is a national public holiday in many countries, in most cases known as International Workers' Day or similar name. So, yeah. And then the Catholic Church dedicated May 1st to Saint Joseph the Worker. So that we have like this an example of like the syncretism happening like kind of in real time. It's like, oh, quick, there's festivals popping out. Let's find a way to assimilate it into the Catholic Church. That's super fascinating.
Saint Joseph the Worker. So, like Jack Nicholson's actual name is Jack Joseph Nicholson. So he's
Interesting.
Jack Joseph the Worker. So Jack, he works all day and no play. He makes it a dull
Yeah.
home.
All
And
work,
that's
no
a
play.
word play. I mean, even Jack says that. Don't you know that I have to look after the hotel until May the 1st?
Yeah, that's
Shouts
right.
like that.
That's right. You picked up on that. The dates in The Shining can
No,
track
so
with May Day.
I mean, I was looking at 1st of May dates. There's a lot of rituals, like witch burning rituals. Even April 30th is the day when Hitler shot himself. by the way. So like this is the day after Hitler died, May the 1st. And
So you have like
so I
death and
thought like,
yeah, you
yeah,
like, which effectively ended the war, right? So then you
yeah.
have like this. So you have these rejuvenation with knowledge that Hitler is dead. That's interesting.
Should we say Hotler? Like, would it be censored or something like that? We should say
Oh, I
Hotler.
have no idea. I think we talk about so much crazy stuff on here. The AI doesn't know what to track. Of course, now I've probably trained it on myself. Um,
I was
y-
two things more. I
yeah.
looked at other dates on May the 1st, like Hotler died, and then Christopher Columbus presents his plans of discovering a western route. Like he presented a route to like the West Indies and the Americas on this day, on May the 1st, 1486. Like this was his presentation day. And then in 2003, Bush, he he made this speech about like mission accomplished. We have entered the war. Like this is the end of the war in
Oh,
Iraq. So this was
when he
May the
landed on the
1st in
aircraft character.
2003. Yeah, aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln. You know
Mm.
about that?
Oh, I was 23 years old when it happened. So I was obsessed with the news. So yeah, I'm old. I remember it very clearly.
I mean, these things, I found these things keep happening, like on May the 1st. I mean, I think something uh, Illuminati or something was founded on May the 1st. I think,
Yeah,
was it that
yeah.
day? Yeah. So
I think that's supposedly the date, right? So I think you have to ask yourself is like, are there all these conspiracies going on that are orchestrating these synchronicities, or is this sort of like is this the structure of the universe itself? So even if people don't know about the things that we're talking about, they're going to end up conforming to the patterns and rhythms of the matrix, unbeknownst to themselves. And I've graduated to that point of view. I think that's kind of I think people can lean into it, and there are conspiracies, but in general, I think this is just the structure. I kind of believe in some form of simulation theory, and that this is just part of the rules of the realm.
um, yeah, I thought about it a lot. I landed on that these things, that these events, they are caused by like big players doing big things. So they're kind of doing rituals, like you do housewarming parties or you do these wedding dates. I don't know if you have that in your country. Like we have these things that we special auspicious days that are marked in the calendar. So, yeah, this is where you should do the wedding, this is when you should do the wedding, something like that. So I think this is what they're actually doing, like looking at the astrological charts, but they're doing it at such a scale. So like there's a lot of stakes involved, and they want to kind of like canonize it. By the way, like canonize this event. Like, this is a canon event. It's happening on May the 1st, or it's happening on like Jesus' birthday in
Yep.
September. So like they want to kind of canonize these events in the way in history. So like I
Yeah,
don't know. That's
I
what I felt.
agree. No, I agree. I agree. Yeah, I mean if Jesus turns out to have been born on September 11th, like which many people are starting to believe, what are we talking about? Like what are we talking about?
I it felt quite disturbing when I first found out. Like I kept seeing these things everywhere. So I was like, how is this happening?
It's okay.
Then
It's
yeah.
okay. It's all gonna be okay. Like it's all gonna be fine. It's all gonna be fine. I've been at this for a while. It's gonna be okay. All right, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so what I thought was interesting about this, I'll just talk about it in passing, since we have so much to cover. But we're talking about these anthropomorphic instantiations of the tree spirits, and this green man archetype that pops up really throughout classical art, and these different rituals that we'll look at. We're going to see figures like Jack in the Green and Green George, but there's actually, we even have like modern echoes of this. You could make the case that figures like Robin Hood or the Green Knight from Camelot or even Peter Pan. I guess that's what I was drawing on earlier when we were talking about this, the devil being like a fawn or like a pan kind of figure. But I don't think it's a coincidence that these figures are dressed in green and associated with the woodlands. So perhaps these are further instantiations and echoes of that Green Man archetype. Apparently, Marie von Franz talks about the Green Man archetype in Man in His Symbols, although Man in His Symbols, but Jung himself does not talk about it. So I'm going to have to go back and track that down. But I just thought that was interesting. I'm even having these synchronicities today. I've been focusing in on the Green Man archetype, and my Instagram feed is just flooded with media that is associated with the Green Man archetype now. I'm not going to go into it because it makes me look schizophrenic, but I'm seeing it reflected back to me in headlines right now.
Yeah, you're not gonna seem schizophrenic.
not to you, but they might show this in a court case one day. Try to have me put into an insane asylum.
I mean, what do you think about like why, like who is actually Green George according to you? I have some ideas.
Well, I mean, I don't know what you mean
Like
by.
any of these archetypes you can pick up and like maybe riff on or maybe go
Well, I
into.
don't know if I don't. To be honest, I'm not educated enough to say, oh, this one's definitely Green George and this one's not. I mean, I know as much about Green George as you do. I mean, I'm learning about this. We don't have Green George ceremonies in America like they do in Europe, so this is just as alien to me. So I think because a lot of these festivals are associated with St. George's Day, which is April 23rd. I guess I knew a little bit about St. George, that there might be some of that might account for who Green George is, but I'm not some expert in it. I have a slide on this and we can skip over it because we're talking about it now, but St. George was I guess like an evangelizing Roman soldier who was like executed in the 4th century, and he became I guess the patron saint of England. That's where you get the St. George's cross and flag from. And he supposedly I think slayed a dragon in Libya because it was like demanding a sacrifice. We can go to that slide, Jordan. I don't know what number it is. You see it's got the big St. George's
Yeah,
cross
we're
on.
there.
So yeah, I think Green George may be connected to St. George, but St. George or the Green George figure, also is in Carinthia, it's in Transylvania, it's in Russia. So I don't know. I'm kind of speculating. I don't know how it got to all those other places. If St. George is primarily associated with England, how it ended up in like Transylvania.
I mean, oh no, I don't think it's that association with England came later. I think because like England was basically these, I think like Druid worshipping people till like
Yeah.
12th century. Maybe I don't know. I don't know the dates, but like Christianity came in later in England. I think so.
That's always like a mind-boggling thing for me to get my arms around is thinking about like this through and through like pagan England. Like I have so much propaganda thinking about it being such a Christianized nation, but like understanding what pre-Christian England is like is I find myself having to like actively unlearn to get my mind around that. And then once you can kind of see how much of their cultures is still rooted in that foundation.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe all the Americans, maybe they associate England with kind of like old monarchies and like church and everything. Because a lot of people who came to America, basically they came because they were being persecuted by the church. So their imagination kind of has. Isn't that the case? I saw that in the film The Witch by Robert Eggers. Like they came, these settlers, they were actually running away from being persecuted for their religion. Maybe.
I mean, that's what we're told. I mean, I'm not super. I mean, I'm not some sort of historian about what the religious wars were like in Europe. But there, there was there was a lot of animosity between the Protestants and the Catholics, and there were a lot of Protestants that that were killed at the hands of the Catholic Church. So yeah. So which immigrants we're talking about? Um, what particular conflicts or inquisitions or whatnot they were subject to? I can't speak on authority. I'm being a little ignorant here, but yeah, that's what they're told. It's that a lot of the people that came to America were escaping religious persecution, but what was going on in Scotland and Ireland and England and France, I think there's probably going to be a different answer to that question, or what was going on in Germany.
I mean, in reference to maybe St. George's Day. So I this maybe reading about it's just tangential. Maybe reading about this, I was reading the novel Dracula earlier this year. So I figured that this the Jonathan. Have you are you familiar with the book Dracula, like Bram
Bram
Stoker's
Stoker.
Dracula, the
Bram
original?
Stoker's.
Ori-
I read it maybe. I read it maybe 6 or 7 years ago for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, I read it
I don't.
this year. Uh, so what actually happened is that the main protagonist of the film, he's like a real estate developer. So he goes to meet this count in Transylvania, who's called Dracula. He's sent there by a real estate agent. So the detail that jumped out to me that he went there on the eve of St. George's Day. So there, while he was traveling to that place, there were a lot of pagan rituals that were happening all around him. So he was like noting it on what's happening here. I'm staying at this inn. What's happening here? They even like incorporated it in the film that came out this year, Nosferatu,
Well,
that pagan rituals.
I
Like
believe St. George's Day is April 23rd, so the eve would be April 22nd, and I think
yeah,
that's if you, now we're
that
back into our puzzle again because I believe that's Jack Nicholson's birthday.
yeah, Jack Nicholson's birthday, Robert Oppenheimer's birthday, and a lot
Yeah,
of other people's birthday as well. So like that's an interesting thing, and then that Dracula is associated like with dragon because the person he was named him after he was called the son of dragon, something like that.
that's right.
So that's what I thought, and then it shows that it's that's beside the point because but I think that the whole novel revolves around like this. I mentioned it again before that this contrast, this conflict between like people setting up this civilization and then they feel them feeling that they are being harmed by outside forces that are not actually familiar to them. Like even the person, the Vlad Dracula, he was known for fighting Muslim invaders. So that's the fear of the outside. Like we are protected in this civilization, and then we fear, and then we create like this sort of paranoia about what lies outside our domain of knowledge, our domain of influence, and what it can do to us, and how should we mitigate it. So that's what I felt that this. So I don't know why I'm talking about this in vegetation
No, I
episode.
think it's all.
You brought
Hey,
up St. George's Day. Yeah.
we never know. I mean, I keep these conversations open so that we can find some sort of spontaneous inspiration somewhere. Um, I think just so I make sure we don't skip too far ahead. If Jordan, if we could go back to slide 144, unless you want to say something uh, about what we've been talking about.
No, I'm good. I think you guys are covering it.
Okay, good. Yeah, it's just this is the work, right? Um, I just want to give a few examples from these slides. The regional variations of May Day and Midsummer rituals. At the top here we have on May Day, girls go door to door singing carols, carrying hoop garlands, and a white dress doll symbolizing the vegetation spirit's blessing. So we see this sort of transition from the vegetation to a figure, right? Which we're going to get into the next section, and we can go to slide 145. Let's pick out one there. Let's see. We can just on we'll do Sweden on May Eve. Lads with birch twigs, led by a fiddler. Here we have our fiddler again. Sing for fine weather harvests, collecting eggs in a basket, placing twigs on on roofs for gifts. And if we can go to slide 146, I encourage anybody, if you want to go deeper into this, just screenshot these slides. You've got the rewind button there. Let's see. This one was interesting. In Russia, on Thursday before Whit Sunday, a birch tree dressed in women's clothes, ribbons, is feasted, carried to village, then thrown into a stream for rain. Dressing up a tree in clothes. So we're getting very close to personification here. And yeah, let's look at this painting on slide 147. It's Midsummer Eve Bonfire by Nikolai Astrup. And what I thought was interesting about this, the burning. I tried to understand the burning of all these trees and poles, like why this happens. Um, I think the idea, if I understand it correctly, is that a lot of the fires and things like that happen so that the spirit can be released from its incarnation and begin the cycle all over again. It's like this purification experience. So I thought that was kind of interesting. That could be me projecting, but that's what I think is happening here with all the fires and the burning of the different effigies and whatnot.
I mean, in Indian context, that is usually the case that you're releasing these spirits. You're releasing, like, if you they give a scientific reasoning that, oh, we're doing this to like remove bugs from the houses if there are any, But like in general, what they actually believe in stories that they tell that we're cleansing the spirit, we're cleansing. They tell us to inhale the smoke. Inhale. It's a pure smoke. It's coming from this sacred fire. So you should inhale the smoke. It will clean you inside out. So that's what they tell us.
What kind of sacred fires do you have?
I mean, that's again housewarming parties. Like if people feel that a ghost is haunting this house, so they create these small fires, and then they do a specific number of chants, and they provide offerings. Please go away from here, and then they think, oh, this house is now ghost free. Give me
I never
five hundred
contemplated whether
dollars.
I never contemplated whether or not people in India believed in ghosts.
Yeah, they
I
do.
They do. That's
Uh,
interesting. I it's
It's
like
like if you've seen those people like in Christians, maybe they're dancing like, and then this pastor is kind of removing the ghost from them. Have you seen that?
yeah, the exorcisms. Yeah.
Exorcism. That kind of thing. It happens in India. It happened to one of my relatives. You know,
So there's
I think it's a mental condition, but like they tell it's ghost.
That's
So
interesting. That's interesting. Yeah. Cool. I need to study up on Hindu exorcisms. That's good.
it's pretty creepy.
Mm. Okay. Let's see here. Um let's go to slide 148. This is just the renewal of the May tree and some we're moving from a situation where it's a one-time thing until, you're having a more, the May trees having some sort of more permanent uh feature there. Um so like in Prague, pieces of the public May tree are kept behind holy pictures until the next May Day. I thought that was pretty interesting. Then burned on the hearth, signifying a cycle of renewal for the vegetation spirit. Württemberg, Germany, bushes set up on houses on Palm Sunday are left for a year, then burned, symbolizing the renewal of the tree spirit, fructifying power for prosperity and growth. We can go to slide 149. Oh, unless Aastik, I see you have some notes here. Did you want to say anything about this?
I wanted to say something about Peter Pan in relation to The Shining.
Oh, yeah, please do.
I mean, there's is the slide? Okay, doesn't matter.
Yeah, we can go back to Peter
So
Pan if Jordan wants to find that slide.
so what I felt was that in the film he calls himself a forever boy.
Ah,
Okay, if you look into the pages, what is written on those slides? Uh, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. It somewhere. Okay, his wife is called Wendy. So there's a Wendy in
That's
Peter Pan as
right.
well.
That's right.
So so he's like kind of, and then there's an association with George and with John, Jack and his son Danny. So like there's a theme of like confusion between who is the son, who is the father. So what I felt was in the movie, it was trying to portray a person who is kind of trapped in a fantasy realm, and it's a forever child like Peter Pan, and is trying to drag Wendy into it, like the when he's actually trying to threaten her up the stairs. That's what I thought, you know. I mean, reading about it, and then the Wendy sues his in the Peter Pan mythos. Like Peter Pan visits her, his shadow is lost, in reference to Carl Jung. So like she come, I mean, it's a wordplay basically. So she sews his shadow together, like integrates his shadow, and then Peter Pan thanks her, and then she says, "Would you go to Neverland with me, where boys never get old?" You know. And she drags her there, and then she disappears in her sleep, or maybe she dreams about it, like going to somewhere. That's what I felt. Is, does that make sense
I think there's a lot
in
there.
reference to The Shining?
Yeah,
Like
yeah. I think it.
dragging into immaturity through violence and everything else, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating thing that you picked up on there, and I will want to go deeper into that at some point. I don't. Are you familiar with Bruno Bettelheim and what's his book on enchantment? Kubrick was really dependent on this text um, when he
What
was putting
folklores,
together.
he was all the folklores he was collecting.
Yeah, so the book that he was consulting a great deal when doing The Shining, and I imagine it pops up all over the place, is Bruno Bettelheim's The Uses of Enchantment. And I wonder if he talked about Peter Pan in that. But
I mean, even the title of this book, The Uses of Enchantment, like Vladimir Nabokov actually wrote the first draft of Lolita was called The Enchanter. So it's like it's he knows it's connected to Vladimir Nabokov, so he's like, oh, it's a good thing. Let me
right, and there's
get,
other references to Lolita in The Shining as well when he's
yeah,
saying to
light of my
Wendy,
life.
"Light of my life."
Yeah.
When she's got the baseball bat.
There's, I mean, people kind of, I don't know, a lot of theorists actually pick up on like this is about children or something like that. I think it's about like mental immaturity. Like you're creating conditions where like a person is forever in a state of being a helpless child who's not able to grow its own independence. That's what I feel about that. Like Jack, me, it's not in that particular scene, but even Wendy, they try to create people they can control. You know, like Wendy wants to control Jack, so she tries to like, and then Jack wants to like retaliate. So there's a thing about like maybe child is related to Ed. You know, in Full Metal Jacket, Private Pyle is called a child repeatedly, and then he's beaten up again and again, and he's transformed into this pure like hardened soldier. So it's like association with the abused child to a person who is like very destructive. So that's what I felt about this thing, not like in child in like literal meaning, like mentally a child, like their tendencies.
Right. Well, I think we should bracket that because that is such a profound thing that we could go a lot deeper on. I also mentioned that as far as we're talking fairy tales and whatnot in relation to The Shining, probably Jack and the Beanstalk would be relevant to this too, because like Jack cuts down the beanstalk with an axe. I have some theories about how that is continuous with the unnamed Kubrick films, but I think putting an axe in Jack's hand could be a reference to that as well. Jordan looks like she might want to weigh in on this real quick.
No, I'm good. We still have a lot of presentation to get through, so I
Yeah.
think we should move forward if that's
Oh
okay.
boy. Yeah, maybe I'll go. Maybe we'll do kind of a lightning round on
Yeah,
this since
sure.
okay. Not I mean it's all interesting. I just thought this image is this is from a on slide 149, if you can pull that up real quick, Jordan. This is a kind of a more modern festival that goes on in Kinninghall, Norfolk. This is the Wassailing with the Lord of Misrule. That's where I got that image from. So just so we have another, it's not going away. These green men figures are staying around with these vegetation festivals. And if we go
Ooh,
to,
and then you
oh sure,
had a personal re-render of reality with some green men locally, like these little statues that
oh yeah,
are usually not green, suddenly were green. Um,
I think
and
that happened before I even got into this. What I was, it makes it, what I was fixating on when the little green men showed up is like I was thinking about Young and UFOs, and I think
exactly.
in the context, so what Jordan's referring to is I have just something seems to be happening with this matrix that we're in. Things that I hyperfixate on seem to materialize in some ways. And I think one particular week I was focusing on Jung and mandala symbolism and UFOs, and I just kept thinking about little green men. And then like this U-Haul truck showed up near me with aliens on it, and then these horse jockeys around town started. I found two of them that turned green with big noses. It's very strange, but it raises a very interesting question about whether or not. Let's see if you can get one of the green jockeys up there. I don't know. It raises very
I
interesting
didn't find a
questions.
green one, but this
Yeah,
is up on the
yeah,
screen is what
yeah.
an example.
Yeah, I think it raises very interesting questions if the little green men in the UFO mythology, if somehow they're connected to the vegetation spirit, and that is something that I had never considered before. Like, why are we talking about aliens being little green men? Like,
Well, and
where did that even come from?
Jacques Vallée connects, I think that's his name, connects fairies to aliens.
Oh, well, then that was in the fairies or woodland spirits. So
Correct. So it all kind of, meshes together.
No, that's good. See, that's why I keep these things open, because something like that'll happen. I can't believe I said I'm like making like little green men show up in reality. I'm going to get committed to an insane asylum.
If you keep saying that, yes.
Okay. All right. Edit it out. Okay. Here's just some of we've talked about a lot of this. I mean, as far as these green men that are show up in Carinthia, Austria. This is slide 150, Jordan. On St. George's Day, which is April 23rd, a leaf-clad man, the Green George, leads a tree procession, and effigy is thrown into water for rain, or the man is dunked or ducked. Let's see here. Oh, this was interesting. In Rula, Germany, in spring, children cover a playmate in branches. They call him the little leaf man and lead him house to house for food, eggs, cakes, sprinkle him with water and feast. So imagine like dressing up your friend when you're like 7 years old. Like he's like a human Christmas tree, and you take them all over town. A lot of these festivals kind of sound fun. I'm not going to lie. Like I think you can make a wholesome argument for reintroducing these in America. And if you go to slide 153, Jordan, this is a permutation of this. I guess they did this from the 16th to 19th century. It was associated with chimney sweeps, but in England they would have this individual who would dress up as a tree and walk around. Here, I pasted over the original image because it wasn't that clear with the secondary image here. But this is called Jack in the Green, and they have these processions with this character. So I never heard of that. But I thought it was super funny. I enjoyed it. And let's see here. And so we're getting into the May Kings and May Queens stuff, which is the real gravy I want to get to. I thought that was so fascinating. Let's go ahead and we'll talk about a May King. In slide 155, we've got in Thuringen, Germany, a May King in a birch bough frame with a bell is hidden, found, and led to officials for guessing wrong guesses, and they incur beer forfeits. So this is all over the place. People dressing up as trees. Well, I don't know why we don't do it here in America. Do we dress up as trees anywhere in America?
I don't know, but what popped in my head was sometimes people started like crocheting around trees. That's the inverse. You're talking about dressing trees
I'm talking
up.
about dressing up as a tree.
Yeah.
Like, where does that happen? I guess we have it in like films and stuff, but
I did as a child, but it was for the Christmas parade. They built this like 3-tiered
you dressed up as a tree for
float.
Christmas?
One year,
Well, there you
they
go.
they made
I,
like a tree, and all the little girls were either in green or dressed up as presents. So we like made up the tree.
that's fun. Well, I guess it still persists in school plays to some degree, but
Yeah.
last time I talked about this, I was like, I really think the Christmas tradition is connected to all of this as well. But it's not happening during the solstice or the summer solstice. It's happening during the winter solstice. So I'm not sure how this changes the conversation. So
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's just a big inversion.
yeah, maybe so. Yeah, it's like, hey, let's take the fertility ritual that they were doing all this time and put it in the winter. Let's mix it all up. Okay. I want to look at May Kings and May Queens. I thought this was interesting because I on the fly last time. I was like, I think beauty queens are connected to the May Queens. So we have the May Kings. I've already mentioned. I'm going to talk a little bit about May Queens. This is a great painting that I found. It's called Queen Guinevere's Maying by John Collier. This is from 1900. It was actually inspired by a Tennyson poem from Atlas of the King, 1859, specifically the poem Guinevere. And I just thought it was a beautiful painting, inspired by a poem. But what was so interesting in looking up May Queens, I found that in Catholic cultures, there is this Maying of Mary. I even sent out a video to you guys earlier because I was doing a search for this on YouTube, where they crown, many cultures crown Mary in May, and they dress her up with flowers and other foliage and whatnot. And this seems to be an instance of tolerated Christian pagan syncretism, or as Aastik said earlier, this effusion of ancient ritual like overcomes the imposed Christianity that is thrust upon the indigenous civilization or populace. So I just thought that was interesting. If you see Mary wearing a crown of flowers, it's a hearkening back to this manifestation of the tree spirit.
You also have a man in the green hood in this painting. You have the green man.
That's true. That's true. I imagine he feels like he's tapping into it as well.
One point.
Sure.
I don't know. Again, I'm talking about that movie Nosferatu. This is the exact image of the ritual that they were doing. This Queen Guinevere's
Guinevere?
Maying. Yeah, but it was like the people surrounded her. They were kind of like rural people, or kind of. But it was actually the same thing. Like a girl. She was on a horse, and then she was carried away into the forest, surrounded by people at night. It's like the inversion of this painting. Like this same painting, but at night, but with like poorer people or something like that. And then so it was supposed to lower the vampire from the ground, and then um, put a stake in his heart again and put him down. Yeah, exactly, that sort of thing.
Whew, I'm gonna have to check that out. I mean, and Aastik already knows this, but there's a reference to Nosferatu in The Shining with Wendy's shadow as she ascends the staircase. So perhaps it's not just like it's not just a nod to some great film that went before. Some influence is possibly a reference back to these folklore traditions that you're talking about.
I mean, I looked up. I was thinking about why this name, such a strange name, but then I realized it is a Latin name, like Nos Feratu. Like Nos, it's like we were, and Feratu means wild. Like it translates to we were wild, Nosferatu. And then if I like kind of speak it, Nosferatu, it sounds like Nosferatu, like V sounds like F if you speak it. So like Kubrick does that sometimes, or some
Yeah,
songwriters that do that. So like Nosferatu is like we are true, like I thought like verite,
right.
like that's the actual translation. We are true and we are wild. So that's what I felt like. this movie was supposed to be about, like, if we were true, we were wild. So that's the title.
Interesting.
It's trivia.
Cool. Can we go to slide 157? Because I'm getting into the real gravy now.
We're there.
All right. So last time we talked about, or I pondered aloud. I was like, is like Miss America and like modern beauty queens, is this derived from the May Queen festivities that they had? And it turns out that it seems to be one of the founts of inspiration for modern beauty pageant culture. There's a great article on this from PBS. I have it down here. Jordan, I have it in the commentary section below if you want to pull it up. But I recommend people. It actually acknowledges the rites and festivities that we've been talking to as being a contributing factor to beauty queen culture. And I've got a couple images up here in the slide. A May Queen pageant from 1887, and then I just thought it was interesting. Miss America from 1921. We've come a long way, and we haven't at the same time, and it makes sense, right? With the bestowing of flowers on the pageant winner. And this led, as I was thinking about that, it led me to Marilyn Monroe. So if we could go to slide 158, because I remembered that she was a pageant queen before anything else. She was a pageant queen, and the very first pageant that she won, I think it was her first, but I guess the one that popularized her in 1948, she won. She became California's artichoke queen, and it's pretty hard to deny that there isn't at least some sort of archetypal energy coming through here of the vegetation spirit, or some PR or some marketing. Her handling. Here, I believe this is in some sort of memorabilia part of the beauty pageant. Her handling these artichokes and having the back of the green, like it's hard to deny after going through all this material that she's not some sort of personification of the vegetation spirit. Now, this is where things get super kooky, and I don't know anything, but relevant to, MK Ultra is a big part of our exploration of the Kubrick material that we're all interested in. There was a predecessor program to MK Ultra that went on from like 51 to 53 called Project Artichoke. And I don't know. I have no proof. This is the document from the CIA website, but I have no proof that Maryland was associated with this. There's in conspiracy culture, there's a lot of talk.
Yeah.
I'm painting a picture here. I don't know. I don't have the documents. I wasn't there. This was, a long time ago. But it is very interesting that the predecessor program to MK Ultra was Project Artichoke.
Well, what I see with her holding it, it looks like the pine cone, the pineal.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Symbol. It's exact, yeah, she's holding it.
That's really interesting. So, I just thought that was cool. Wild speculation.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Okay, so as we have these figures of the vegetation spirit, they ultimately end up like marrying them in these festivals. And that's going to get us to Saint Bride's Day and Saint Bride. Give a couple more examples of the May King and Queen. Sometimes they're associated with frogs, like in Bohemia here in slide 159, Jordan. At Whitsuntide, a bark-clad king and soldiers ride horses with branches. A frog is beheaded as a rain charm, and the king is chased. One such instance of all this. There's the execution of frogs in Pilsen, Bohemia. King in a rush hat leads a troop. A frog flayer hangs frogs on a gallows in a green branch hut as a rain charm. So like the May King stuff gets associated with these rain charms. The flower crowns are always popular. If we can go to slide 160, and this is where we start to get into the brides and grooms that are associated with this. In Blekinge, Sweden, and I think Aastik can talk about this in regards to Midsummer, perhaps. But you have this Midsummer bride and groom are treated as married, collecting gifts. Other youths choose brides. In France, on May Day, a jilted man in leaves. I guess he's got it all. He's wearing these leaves. The bridegroom of May is awakened by a girl. It leads to dancing and must marry within a year or face exclusion. So we have these instances of marriage between May Kings and May Queens, or brides and bridegrooms. And a lot of this comes from this Saint Bride, who I never heard of, but they used her to like replace this Celtic goddess Brigide. They were like, oh, I don't know, they kind of spelled the same, so let's just give them Saint Bride. So Saint Bride's Day, also known as Saint Brigide's Day, is celebrated on February 1st in Ireland, Scotland, and the Isle of Man, marking the traditional start of spring and the feast day of Saint Brigide, one of Ireland's patron saints alongside Saint Patrick and Saint Columbia. I could go more into it, but that's who that is in the right in that stained glass window painting. And she, on that day, she has these little crosses too. This like these green crosses. I forget what they're called. They're called Brigide's crosses. I guess they're made from rushes or straw, and supposedly they used her to supplant this Celtic goddess Brigide. Brigide is a member of the Tuatha De Danann, associated with poetry, healing, smithcraft, protection, and fertility, and was revered during Imbolc, February 1st, a festival marking spring's onset, fire, and lambing season. So just more of that continued theme we've talked about with the syncretism of these rites and rituals with Catholic saints. So I maybe both of you knew who this was. I did not. I'm really giving the sparsest details, but yeah, Brigide was replaced with Saint Bride.
I'm familiar with this saint as like Bridget, or like
Yeah.
But you saying it Brigide, there's another Brigide in the news. I don't know.
Who?
Macron's wife.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah, that's a Brigide.
And I don't know if she's in the news. She's she's in our algorithm feeds because of Candace Owens. But yeah, I mean, interesting question. Yeah, that is interesting. Thinking about the meaning of that name and connecting it to fertility and why she is in Candace Owens' crosshairs. I remain agnostic on this question.
You're playing it safe.
Yeah, I've played it real safe in this one. Aastik, I've kind of run roughshod here. Do you want to stop me and say anything?
You mentioned that I'd have something to say about like Midsummer.
Yeah.
There's one interesting point I wanted to point out in regards to the film. So what the protagonists actually were anthropologists. So why they went to that place? They were actually like practicing anthropologists. They went there to write their thesis, and so what the movie actually shows that these rituals exist, but it tries to ground them in practicalities of life, like Fraser describes it. you know so practicalities of life is what you the anthropologists, they ask questions like, how do you like not get do if you're not bringing new people here, because when they entered the town it said, we do not welcome new people here, please stay out of here, because they wanted to like kind of preserve their race. That is the subtext. So like, how do they meet new people? So so all the rituals, they were in service to inculcate a new member, to like bring in a new member and send out another. So that's what I felt like the film succeeded in grounding the practicalities of their like strange beliefs in their rituals. So everything kind of has a purpose if you like think about it little more. Like there's some wild stuff, but like what ends up happening is like it's very understandable if you're like that woman who's in that state, and then you're approached by this guy, and then so that's an aside, but like that's what I wanted to say. Like i- in from the point of view of anthropology, they're trying to ground it in the practicalities of life. That's what I felt like, how these all these religions and all these things, they kind of develop. They developed in order to pursue the practicalities of life, like assign roles to create some sense of order of where you exist in the world and what sort of technology and what sort of anxieties rule your life. I kind of, when I was studying about it, I looked up on Wikipedia about the life cycles of kings. There was one king who died 31 years of age, and I thought like 31 years of age, like that's a very low age to die. Then I kind of thought like, what kind of values would a 31-year-old person have? Like, and by the and during this 31 years of age, he's born, he's getting educated, and he's being the king, and he's going to wars and everything. So the worldview, it trickles down into society from that point of view. So, and in Midsummer there was also this strain of inbreeding, and then like how it like kind of distorts, and then people were that inbred person was scribbling on paper, and then there was a group of people, they were priest like people, and they were deciphering what he's scribbling and then creating canonization. So this, he means, it means this, this inbred person, he's a holy person, he's an oracle, he can see what we cannot see. So I kind of found it very fascinating in that sense. And I found it like, from the person who is actually directing it, from his mindset, so much of the values of the culture, they trickle down, because he's living in that kind of war state in a very young man's world. So it's kind of imposed on the entire society, and the entire society is warlike. You know, that's what I felt. Uh, that's a
I think
small
I
thought.
think I think you're right to bring all of that up. I mean, that's kind of lost in all of this, is like how, it's easy for us to kind of be like, oh, this is like another silly ritual, but we think about how important it was for regulating every aspect of practical life, including building group identity that would possibly necessary for survival of these different cultures. So that's something that probably I've not dwelled enough upon in all of this, and I need to think about that. Um, Although I don't think I've spoken ill of any of these cultures, but it does add a layer of gravity to this. There, a lot of this could have been life and death for people as they were emerging out of the primordial state. Okay. I think just talk about the last slide. I think it's just more of this Saint Bride's Day. What was so interesting to me, it's like, and a lot of this involves like these midsummer marriages and stuff like that, but like apparently the word bride does not come from Saint Bride or Saint Brigitte or whatever her name is. Like the word bride like comes from birds or something. I don't know. So it's like the idea that there's Saint brides and these midsummer marriages and stuff like that, like has supposedly like completely unconnected, but I don't know. Um, yeah. Uh, I don't know. Here's just one from Westphalia, Germany. Two girls escort a flower-crowned Whitsuntide bride door to door, sing for eggs to invoke the vegetation's spirits and blessings. So yeah, I think we're up here an hour and 23 minutes. We've covered a lot of ground. I think all the major ideas were hit. I tried to look into like, why did people start thinking about, trees being ensouled, all of that. And I don't know if I got further than what we talked about last time with birds and wind and all these things like going through the forest. So they naturally ascribed some sort of spirit to the trees. But it really is a bigger question about why they viewed spirits in everything, not just trees. And how do you get that first assumption? And this goes all the way back probably to the conception of magic as a form of science or primitive science for these people. So need to think deeper about that. I'll go deeper into it. I think I've said everything that I'd like to say. I'll just yield the floor to both of you and then we'll close it out.
Um, I wanted to say one thing about trees. Like, the trees actually have this kind of power in our culture because they're kind of everywhere, and they like old trees supposedly like will come across the Zeus being born out of an oak a few chapters later. So I read about it.
Hmm.
But like trees, these old trees, they have these lifespans that are bigger, larger, longer than the most people living in the culture, because people were dying in their 40s and 50s. So what they felt like, this tree remains, we all die, but this tree remains. So they, I think they instinctively attributed these special magical powers to these trees, and also these oaks and these special trees, the trees that lived for a long period of time, they were high up in the mountains, like in context of Greece. So I think that's what it felt, this imagery, this hierarchical imagery, it transcoded into their minds. So that's why they sort of started attributing these values to them.
I think that's a really great point in the sense that if you've got trees that are hundreds of years old and your lifespan's relatively short, you think in your mind the thing that lives longer is like maybe higher up, and that we can say like a god is in that tree. I kind of like your analysis there. I like that.
Yeah, so that's what I felt, basically. um, I mean, there's an imagery to trees that they go down deep, and then they bring out these fruits. So like they renew the dead. So that's what I felt like, that is something that made them important. And then they are kind of gift givers to people. So like if people find trees in an arid, like even in Christianity, maybe it's a kind of, it was formed in a very deserted area, I think. Maybe, is that so? I don't know. I mean, there
uh
was not a lot of trees. So I think that kind of scarcity and anxiety, it created this special power to trees. Oh, this tree gives me fruit. So it's like a gift giver. So it got written into the life. But nowadays we don't have that. We don't attribute that kind of special anxiety to trees, like, oh, if only I could find a tree, I would sit in its shade. If only I could find a tree, I would like grab a fruit from it. Now we have it all automated, so we're not conscious of them actually playing a part in our lives. It's kind of divorced from us. That's why I feel like they had this spiritual connection to these trees, because they were actually like interacting with them daily. They had to like watch them, water them, like see if there is any disease on the trees or not, because it would affect their lives. That's why it got built into their thinking, and then they pass it on to the young, and slowly this kind of traditions, they blossomed around all of this. That's what I hypothesized.
I like what you're saying there as well, and it recalled to mind that when you're talking about the roots, and I don't know about burial practices, but I could see an individual being like, look, if we have like a burial ground, or you bury me beneath this tree, I'll be taken up into the tree. It will feed off me, and in some ways, this is like a form of immortality. And I am preserved in this tree, and maybe that's where tree spirit ideas come from. Like we're all sort of returning to the earth and being taken up by it, and maybe there's some sort of idea that there could be even like a kind of reincarnation or something like that going on. I think this idea you see like in a lot of graveyards in America, you see like a lot of trees, and I believe you see this in England and other parts of Europe as well. And it may come from that belief. I don't know, but they say like the reason why I, and that's why like a lot of the trees, they're a type of they're like they're I guess they're like yew trees or whatever, the waxy needles and things like that. They don't really go through the same cycle, so it's like they preserve better, and so they don't die like other trees do, and it kind of contributes to this notion that there's some sort of immortality. And I wonder if death and being taken up in these trees is also contributing to the idea that they are ensouled. I have no idea how these different cultures viewed that, but it wouldn't surprise me at all that that's where that comes from. And they say that they still do this, where they put all these trees in graveyards to counteract the natural decomposition, like that this is like offsetting like it takes up the gases and makes things smell nice as the bodies decompose. But I don't. It's like when you were saying earlier, like, oh, we burn the trees in order to get rid of insects or something like that. You're like, no, no. What we're really doing is that there's still this belief, conscious or not, that we're doing some sort of purification, like spiritual purification thing. So I think we're making progress on this question.
That's all I had to say. I wondered if you would go into a bit more detail with Project Artichoke, maybe.
I don't know much more than that. I mean, outside of it, I think they were testing LSD and they were testing like different types of serums and true serums and things like that. And um, I, I, I've, I don't know. Yeah, Jordan, what do you got there? Do you want to tell us a little bit about it? Maybe in the first 2 paragraphs. Do you mind reading that to us?
Sure. This is just the Wikipedia page, but it was also referred. Yeah, Operation Artichoke, developed by the CIA for researching methods of interrogation. It was succeeded by Project MK Ultra, also known as Project Bluebird. Yeah, I mean, kinda
No,
sounds
it
like
sounds like
more of the
some
same.
like more
Yeah.
Manchurian candidate stuff.
Yeah, LSD, hypnosis, isolation, lots of drugs. Um, yeah, I mean, oh, this is an interesting 77 days.
Hmm.
An agent was kept on LSD for 77 days. I mean, who knows? All of this has been, like, declassified. It all is pretty
Yeah.
encoded in and of itself, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. Well, I probably have to bring this session to a close. I've got some other things I need to attend to, but Austin, I wanted to thank you so much for participating. You had a lot of valuable insights today, and Jordan for everything that she does. She makes everything happen. So, thank you, Jordan, for participating and doing all the editing.
you're most welcome, and thank you so much for joining us, Aastik.
Thank you for having me
Yeah,
again. Uh,
appreciate your
have
insights.
have a good one.